Corruption is not only to be found in government. Corruption is also in the private sector. And in many ways, it originates from the private sector, because it is those who are in the private sector who seek to corrupt those who are in government. That's how it happens. One of the things that we did was to stop state capture. We stopped it in its tracks.
President Ramaphosa has to be a man of steel. Even with all the criticisms that have been levied against him in these last 6 years or so in his presidency, he still believes that he has actually achieved a lot for South Africa. Let's listen to what he has to say about how he's defeated state capture, and I'll be back for some analysis.
The first was state capture. In the past few years, we've faced the specter of state capture, where we had to deal with state capture and respond to what state capture has done in our country. And I can say without any equivocation that one of the things that we did was to stop state capture. We stopped it in its tracks. And those who had all those horrible designs on our country, on our government, and on our economy, we stopped them in their tracks. And some who were like the faces of state capture have run away. But we also know that some still remain embedded in the networks that were set up during that period. And those are precisely those that we are pursuing. Aided by the Zondo Commission, we've identified precisely what was done. And the process of investigation and even of prosecuting those who were involved in state capture is ongoing. People often say, well, we're not seeing much that is being done about corruption. I had the occasion to read an article that was written by a leading journalist in our country, Mr. Dedoit, who is not a great supporter of the governing party or the government. And he said, in talking to the National Prosecuting Agency and also talking to people who work in there, including the head, Shamila Batoyi, he came to the conclusion that that agency which had been captured, one of the many agencies that were captured, has been restored to what we envisaged in our Constitution, to be an independent institution that will deal with prosecutorial matters without any interference from politicians, but more particularly from the head of state. And he said it was a joy for him to find that out, which confirmed to him that we are serious about fighting corruption. Which also said, in the end, the independence and non-interference of that institution basically means that we are going to pursue those. As one questioner then raised about corruption. And let me immediately say, by the way, corruption is not only to be found in government. Corruption is also in the private sector. And in many ways, it originates from the private sector, because it is those who are in the private sector who seek to corrupt those who are in government. That's how it happens. So quite often, and by the way, let me immediately give a preamble. There's always been corruption in South Africa. The apartheid government was inherently corrupt itself, and those who were involved in that government were hugely corrupt. The problem is the media was not independent enough to talk about the corruption that prevailed at that time. So when people talk about corruption, they talk about it as though it is the ANC-led government that has been more corrupt than any other. But my good friends, corruption originates from the private sector, and it is often not spoken about. And it also happens through people who have been corrupted and who have evil intents also in the public sector without giving them any free pass. And dealing with corruption has been one of the areas that I have focused on, that we have focused on as government. And that is why in dealing with state capture, we said we will ensure that we reform the NPA, we give the Hawks all the power and also reform them, and the police and all state agencies that have to do with criminal justice. Having done all that, we are then able to say they must do their work. They must get on with their work, because the president cannot be, and Matthew Porser will know this as a lawyer, the president cannot be a policeman, cannot be the prosecutor, cannot be the jury, and cannot be the judge. Cannot be. But what the president can be is to enable the prosecuting authorities to do their work, and to do it freely without any form of interruption or interference. What the president or the government can do is to enable the police, the Hawks, and all of those to do their work, and to enable the judiciary to be fully strengthened to do its work.
Yes, so what do you guys think? I think this term, state capture, is like one of those terms in which we try to attach terms that actually describe corruption in that regards by these fancy terms. Just like how in Europe, for example, or in the West, in the wider West, the term poverty was replaced with the term social exclusion to sort of like take away the weight of the sort of like a decay attached to poverty from what actually has been manifesting as poverty in the West. And so social exclusion became a dominant term to capture what we would generally refer to as poverty. And so state capture is also like that. But state capture simply, it simply refers to corruption, rabid corruption at the level of the state. It was first used by the World Bank, at about in the 2000s to describe certain characteristics of the transition from Soviet communism in Central Asian countries. Okay, and so state capture was kind of like the term that erupted to describe how state-backed companies, private individuals would try their best to manipulate policy in order to work to their favor. Okay, and so some major families in these nations, for example, could actually have people within the government, or they would set up their own puppet, so to speak, within the government to try to manipulate policy or work towards the effectiveness of certain policies so that it works to their favor. And so this is what Cyril Ramaphosa is actually arguing here, that he actually has stopped that. Without going deep into names and all that, I know Julius Malema, when he speaks about state capture, he easily raises the names like the Ruperts and Oppenheimers and Guptas, and how some of these big families, might have actually had influences on the state, on the direction of the state, and I don't really know how true those allegations are. But Ramaphosa here is actually arguing that he did, as much as was in his power to stop that state capture, and that this means that he has tried his best to eliminate corruption at the level of the state in South Africa. But with all the criticisms, and allegations around, especially heaped upon him himself, President Cyril Ramaphosa, and many members of the ANC, it seems that this thing with state capture, corruption, I think it has actually been accused. State capture has been accused of being one of the core reasons to the demise of ESCOM. So right now, load shedding in South Africa has been as a result of this kind of state capture, where whenever policies aren't being made in favor of, some hegemonic officials or hegemonic actors in certain state industries, they pull out, and then they cause kind of like a crisis in
in the functioning of that sector, and which then affects the wider community. And so in trying to see Cyril Ramaphosa struggle in reigniting ESCOM's capacity to provide electricity for South Africa, it might be questionable to how much he has done to stop state capture in ESCOM and many other industries. I usually read a lot of your comments here on Kwazemi, and I see that many industries that actually seem to have been affected by state capture, and in which Cyril Ramaphosa seems to be paralyzed, and he's really not able to understand how to go about resolving this issue. One of them is also the Ministry of Police, so led by Minister Becky Selle, who has received all kinds of attacks from multiple parties, multiple private individuals on the rampant rate of crime in South Africa, to which South Africa has been termed the murder capital of the world. And I would suspect that the whole thing with state capture is actually driving that nuance in the Ministry of Police, and also the water shedding that has been raised as a really potent problem in South Africa, which many people are not taking cognizance of, that there's a looming water crisis that would even be worse than the electricity crisis. But because the moment you take away water from the people, that's a basic need. Okay, that's a basic need for life and its essence, the environment. And also that's something also that Cyril Ramaphosa might need to maybe walk through to really understand and try to get these issues fixed, for the basic South Africans who are complaining, about the demise they have faced ever since the promise of the Rainbow Nation in 1994, and how the ANC hasn't been able to meet up to the obligations of the Rainbow Nation. So I really don't know. You guys would have to fill up the comments with what you think about Cyril Ramaphosa's action and this statement he has on how he has done a lot to eliminate state capture. So what do you guys think about this? Share your thoughts in the comments.